You know, sometimes history has these loose threads, stories that just don't quite fit where we think they should. Today, we're going to pull on one of those threads. We're going on a hunt for a lost people, a group hidden in a place you would absolutely never ever expect to find them.
Okay, so when I say Croats, what comes to mind? Probably the beautiful Adriatic coast, right? Sunny beaches, ancient cities. But what if I told you the historical record points somewhere completely different? I mean, way up north. What if a huge branch of the Croatian people actually once lived in northern Germany? It sounds wild, I know.
So this is our stage, the land between the Elbe and Oder rivers. Historians have a cool name for it, Germanica Slavica. And back in the early Middle Ages, this place was, well, it was a total crossroads. A real melting pot of different tribes, coming and going, clashing, mixing. It was a dynamic, fluid frontier. And it's right here that our mystery starts.
Right, so how do we even start looking for them? This is going to be a bit of a historical detective story. We're going to follow a trail of breadcrumbs, clues left behind in old texts, and even in the names of places that still exist today. Let's see if we can piece this puzzle together.
First things first, who are we even looking for? Well, the old chroniclers had a name for them, the Black Croats. The name Black probably just meant northern, to set them apart from the white Croats who lived further south, down by the Carpathian Mountains. And these Black Croats, from what the records say, were living right on the doorstep of the super powerful Frankish kingdom. Okay, clue number one, and this is a big one. It's a direct hit. We have a 12th century German chronicle, the Annalisa Saxo, and it doesn't just hint at them, no, it calls them out by name, the Croat. I mean, that's about as clear as it gets. A solid footprint right there in the historical record. Clue number two is even cooler because it's literally written on the map. So back in the year 901, a chronicler named Thietmar of Merseburg is writing about this area, and he mentions a specific spot called Hvoti Vikus. And guess what that means? The Croat village. A whole village. This tells us they weren't just nomads passing through. No, they were settling down, building communities. All right, clue number three, and honestly, this one might just be the smoking gun. It's from a church document from 1086, and it's basically a list of all the tribes in the area. And it doesn't just mention the Croats. It says, Croati et altera Croati, which means Croats and other Croats. Think about that. That's huge. It's not just one rogue tribe, it's multiple. Distinct Croat groups that were well known enough to be officially listed by the church. Okay, so we've got some pretty solid evidence here, right? So let's zoom in a little bit. Let's look at some of the big players in this region, the major tribes, and see if we can find an even more direct link to these northern Croats. So let's talk about the Obertrites. These guys were a big deal. You can see they controlled a huge piece of land up along the Baltic coast, basically northeastern Germany today. They weren't just one tribe, they were a whole confederation, a bunch of smaller groups that banded together to become a real regional power. And this confederation, it was a whole mix of peoples. You had the Obertrites themselves, then there were the Wagri, the Warnabe, and the Palabians. It's important to know it was this kind of alliance because it helps explain how an outside group could come in and actually have a major influence. And here it is, this is the big what if. Some sources suggest that the very first elected ruler of this whole powerful confederacy, a guy named Visimir, was a leader of the White Croats. Just let that sink in. If that's true, it means a Croat was right there at the very beginning helping to found one of the most powerful political entities in the entire region. That's a game changer. But the trail doesn't go cold there. Not at all. Let's move our search a little bit, heading east and south from Obertrite lands, because what we find is, you guessed it, more tribes and more potential links to a Croat presence. Okay, so let's get the lay of the land. To the east, you've got the Latici, another big federation. Then, a bit further south, along the Havel River, you find the Havelane. Both of these were major Slavic groups, really important players in the story of this area. And this is where things get really interesting, where all our clues start to click together. Remember our chronicler, Thietmar? Well, he links this Havelane tribe to another, much older tribe called the Huroli, a group that other historians have connected to the early Croats. And where does he make this observation? Right near the same spot where he mentioned the Croat village. You see? All the evidence is pointing to the same small patch of land. It's incredible. You know, talking about tribes and federations can feel a bit abstract. So let's put some faces to the names. Let's make this history a bit more personal and talk about some of the actual rulers, the leaders who are in charge of these northern lands. So let's look at 3 key rulers who really define this era. First up, in 862, you have an Arbitrite chief named Hebemesel, who has to bend the knee to the mighty Franks. Fast forward a couple of centuries to 1043, and we have Radibor, a powerful Christian leader who ends up getting killed in battle. And then, in 1093, the story of Kruto ends. He was a pagan ruler who did something amazing. He actually united the Arbitrites and the Lutici. So these 3 guys really represent a period of massive change and conflict. Let's zoom in on Radibor for a second. His legacy is literally on the map today. His capital was called Rossisburg. Sound familiar? It should. It's now the modern German city of Ratzeburg. How cool is that? A direct line from this medieval Slavic leader right to a town you can visit today.
And what about Kruto? He was a brilliant strategist. He ruled from a fortress called Buku, and he picked the perfect spot, an island where 2 rivers met. And that very spot, well, it would eventually grow into one of the most famous and powerful trading cities in Germany, Lübeck.
So this all leads to the big question, right? If these tribes, with all their Croat connections, were such a big deal, where did they go? Why aren't they on the map anymore? In this last part, let's look at how this incredible story started to fade away. Well, the beginning of the end really kicks off in the late 12th century. Around 1170, the Arbitrites and the other tribes in the area finally had to acknowledge the authority of the Holy Roman Empire. And that single moment, that submission, it was the turning point. Their independence was basically over. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like a switch was flipped. It was a slow, gradual process that took generations. First, the ruling class started to Germanize. They took German names, adopted German customs. Then, German farmers and traders began moving in. And over the next few centuries, the old Slavic culture and language just sort of got absorbed into the bigger German culture around them. But, and this is the most amazing part of the whole story, the Oberschreit ruling family, they didn't disappear. They were smart. They adapted. They survived. They evolved into a German noble family, the House of Mecklenburg. And get this, they continued to rule in that region until 1918. 1918. That is a direct, unbroken line from a medieval Slavic chief all the way to the 20th century. Just wow.
So, that's the story of the Black Croats. It's such a powerful reminder that history isn't a neat and tidy timeline. It's messy, it's layered, it's full of surprises. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden histories, what other forgotten connections are lurking right under the surface of the maps we use every day? The maps we think we know so well.